Are we prepared here in Asia?
Hi. Well, it depends on where you are. I think if you're on the coast, if it's an emerging country on the coast where you don't really have great infrastructure, you don't really have great regulatory regime, there are problems. I think when you look at things like the floods in Thailand a couple of years ago, the impact was terrible on, say, the hard disk drive industry and on the automotive industry. You saw prices spike by almost 30% because of supply shortfalls. So there are global impacts for these types of natural disasters, especially if you look at things like the automotive sector. There were delays in automotive sector globally because there were plants in Japan that produced 60 to 80% of things like airflow sensors, that sort of thing, that actually halted production in the U.S. And in European factories, not just Japanese factories.
All right, I mean, supply chain is one thing, but what about the human cost? It seems that some countries are less prepared when it comes to that.
Sure, of course. I mean, we saw in say, Aceh in 2004, the vast amounts of aid that came in, and even in Sri Lanka on the south coast and east coast. I was actually there for a couple of years looking at the aid and looking at how to rebuild the economies and the societies there. So the human cost is massive. When you look at the cost of, say, houses and infrastructure as well, in Thailand 2 years ago, that was equivalent to about 12% of GDP, the direct impact. So there's the loss of life, there's the loss of the hard infrastructure and housing, and then there's the economic impact on business and supply chains.
Of course, the hard lessons in Thailand, in Indonesia, after the floods, earthquake in Japan. Have these countries learned a lesson? Is the next crisis going to be less as a result?
Well, we saw in Thailand, about a quarter of all Japanese companies that are manufacturing in Thailand are in the 7 industrial parks that were impacted. It took the Thai government a long time to respond with flood control systems, and I don't think a number of the Japanese companies are still convinced that the flood control systems are in place. And when you look at things like the impact on energy production in Japan, peak energy production in Metro Tokyo is down by a third after the March 2011 earthquake. That energy supply is back on, but that transition back to nuclear, which is under discussion in Japan right now, will certainly impact the cost of production in Japan.
All right, Tony, quick last question from you. What's the next crisis going to reveal about Asia?
Well, I think these things continue to reveal the central nature of Asia in global supply chains, in many, many global supply chains. The world is already relying on Asia in a big way, and that will only continue. We haven't necessarily seen the regionalization of supply chains that people started talking about a few years ago. So, Asia is core, and I think the world is going to have to start to develop some of these redundancy plans for global supply chains.